I welcome Toloni for this podcast. This is a kind of a podcast where I'm doing with a jargon buster in the RPA. RPA is filled with jargon somehow or the other because not all people are proficient in it. So making it more accessible, making it more easy to learn is what a jargon buster job is all about. So handling team in the RPA and also getting the right solution for the people in order to understand, okay, this is what you're supposed to do in an RPA and an automated system. So I'm here with Toloni to just demystify what is this process all about in order to become an RPA professional. In this world which is moving more towards the deep learning, automation is such thing that we are supposed to be looking forward to. So yeah, I welcome Toloni for this podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I know. Let's just start with the questions then. So I just want you to give that brief intro about yourself and your journey into the RPA as a professional. Of course, there are people who are learning it, they are enthusiasts. But to be a professional, it takes a lot of time in order to understand this requirement of what this profession really needs from you. What are your requirements that you are supposed to be satisfying? So yeah, go on, Taroni.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Rachel. I started my RPA journey in 2016. I would say 2015 towards the end of 15 because started doing a bit of research, which is normally what everyone does when you're trying to get into a different career. You start doing your research. So in 2015, I was consulting. I was with a consulting firm in London, and they did have a lot of clients where you have to work for their clients. Europe and Africa and other areas as well. So as part of my and it's sort of as part of my sort of consulting role, I did get an opportunity to work in an insurance firm, and they had literally started their RPA journey probably 1 or 2 years into it. So I was sort of brought in as a developer, but then I didn't have any prior experience into RPA, so I was actually interviewed as a .NET developer, which I was doing at that point. So because then most of the tools out there were really based on the .NET framework. So then I'd interviewed as a .NET developer and I'd started developing in 2016. So pretty much it's been like 5 years for me sort of in my RPA journey. And as part of that, I've kind of just moved around a couple of tools in the market, Blue Prism being one, UiPath. I've just done a bit of proof of concept in UiPath, and I've done a bit of development in in automation anywhere as well. So if you look at all these kind of tools, they are similar. Um, so they are similar. It does take a while for you to get used to them. So it's taken me literally 5 years to sort of become what people will call professional, which sometimes I still don't feel like I'm a professional.
Toloni, there has been this RPA, which is still a jargon to the world. Of course, it's a jargon to the world because not all the people are proficient, not all the people tend to know this thing because there's an hype about deep learning, there's an hype about machine learning. Of course, RPA is also an hype and it's an hope to most of the process that we are thinking about. So can you just explain what's this robotic process automation all about and the benefits from it? Who can really benefit from it?
Okay, so RPA stands for, as you know, robotic process automation. It's all about software automation that can mimic user activities. When we talk about user activity, we're talking about those working in the office, things like they would normally write, read, and execute some actions. So RPA is sort of that software automation that would mimic some of these activities to be able to get you a business process automation. And when we kind of demystify or look more into what we call a business process, a lot of people kind of get confused and they all mix. Every organization, every place of business would have a process. And if you work for a travel agency, there is a process to refund your money. For instance, there's a process to cancel your flight. So all of these are sort of processes within an organization, and some of them can be automated with RPA and some can't be automated with RPA. So when we look at the benefits of RPA in the industry, RPA is more geared towards organizations more than individuals. So RPA is completely different from, let's say, um, coding in Python only. Being a Python developer, it's a completely different from being a Ruby on Rails developer. So RPA is more of a specialized package sort of tool set that you need to automate different sort of applications within an enterprise. So there is a lot of benefit from it. One benefit being productivity, and organizations able to become more productive with RPA. They're able to also become more efficient. So if personally, if I gave you a document that had, let's say, 5,000 words, and I said, Visual, could you enter this into the computer? There would be some level of mistakes on your perspective. Some might be, typos. Some might be, even writing words that don't even exist in the document. With RPA, because it's quite repetitive. So these are repetitive tasks that a business person would conduct daily or routinely. So with RPA, because it's been programmed to work with repetitive tasks, is able to do this without errors. But there is some marginal errors, and that error is being, whatever you program into it, that's what you're going to get. So it's garbage in, sort of garbage in, garbage out. So, when we talk, and there are other benefits, there are also benefits of customer experience. So if you try to improve your process or you try to automate some part of your processes, what you will find is that also directly or indirectly affects the customer. If you were to automate a process, let's say back then, years ago, when the bank were becoming more digital, you would ask the bank, to send you, let's say, your debit card, or and they could tell you 5 to 10 working days. But with automation, you can kind of reduce that number of time because things that will be done in the back office, things that are going between different departments, can be automated. So this could also reduce the wait times for customers. So in turn, that kind of creates that customer experience. Every customer wants to bank with someone that can give them faster returns. So these are some of the benefits for an enterprise, and also benefit for if you're looking at benefit for individuals. It's an emerging tech, so it's also a very niche area. So most of the individuals, developers like myself, might want to get into something like this where they're able to command. I know this is some of the questions I get, where you're able to command more salary because it's a niche area. It's completely different, but being like a core software engineer, because this doesn't create, how would I explain it? It doesn't create applications. So at the end result of RPA isn't a mobile application, neither is it a web application. But what you end up creating is something called bots. And this bots or lives or thrives on your enterprise applications.
Yeah, no, that's true because today it's all about the chatbots which we are coming out. There are startups which are coming out with the bots for specific purpose. Let me just say it's for the banking. It's all about that company which is making that right move, right? You know, it's not hiring just the right professional to do one task only. It's millions of tasks together. You said about the Android application. I'm a Flutter developer. You should be knowing the pain of us because every time when we design a new system, or else we try to bring out something new, there is something called as testing, the QA people who can really spoil your dreams off. There are a lot of things. So what kind of a software architecture should we be looking about, and what kind of testing or the test bench cases that we should be looking about? you know I'm talking in terms of development, testing, and the deployment of these applications. What's the process all about in the RPA?
So OPA it's very similar to any software development or software life cycle, delivery life cycle, wherein you have different procedures. So with RPA as well, you have a process where you do analysis, and your business analyst will be involved. But this time your business analyst is not. They're getting requirements on automated bots. So your business analyst would sit with someone we call an SME, a subject matter expert. So these are people that normally do the work every day. That's their job description. So they would sit with someone like this sort of person and sort of map this process. So all they're trying to get is, what are the kind of volumes? Before you automate a process, you're not going to automate a process that takes um, a human to do 1 minute. It's just a waste of time. So they look at different perspective. They look at the volume. If we automate this, what's the pain point? If there is less bandwidth within the team, how many bots do we sort of introduce to help with this? So they look at different things as part of the analysis. They look at the process, if the process is fit for purpose, if the process can be automated or not be, or won't be automated. So they do a lot of triage during that time. They look at the impact as well. And once they've kind of scored that process as good for automation, what would normally happen is, that process would sit within some kind of prioritization queue. So there might be other processes that a business analyst might get from the business, because in this kind of scenario, because OPA is sort of something that can be applied to different angles. So you can have within, let's say for instance, within a bank, the business analyst is getting some requirements from the reconciliation team. The business analyst can also be getting requirements from the finance team. So there would be different kind of prioritization based on all these sort of processes. So once this is prioritized, what would normally happen is you have to either schedule a developer. And what most organizations, the ones that are quite established, would have something called a center of excellence. So the center of excellence would house different kind of expertise. So what would normally happen is once the process has been prioritized and they've said, this is the process we want to automate, this would normally go into a point of design. You want to design this sort of process. So there's this misconception that I know we always preach it because we say everything a human is doing, you're trying to replicate that with the software bot, but sometimes it's not always the case, and sometimes you could make it more efficient, whereby when you use different kind of, because this boils down to how you understand the systems. Some of these systems might have things like APIs enabled, and with APIs you have access to more than the information that's actually displayed on the screen. So you might be able to use that kind of technique to automate the process, and also then that's where also the business analyst comes in, because people perform a process differently. If we were to perform a process, you might know shortkeys. You might know, oh, Control A does this. I'm new. I don't know that. So I'm going to go as far as different, there are different permutations as well. So these are things that your business analyst would help you tease out. And during the design phase, you kind of go, this is how this process should be designed. This is what we call to be process. So we are saying this is how this is going to be designed. And once that's done, you always go back into the kind of the development phase. So you don't do development without actually doing the design. So that's why I said it's quite similar to the software delivery cycle. So once you define, then the developer starts working on it. So most times the developer can act as a developer and also a tester. So RPA isn't really big on testing roles. So it's not something that you use Selenium or those kind of testing technologies, because RPA is more visual.
Appium, Olmium is there for the testing of an Appium is for the web, is for the mobile application. Holmium is for your website. So there are a lot of software packages which come. Yes.
So RPA isn't sort of that kind of technology where it's big on testing. So most times the developers will sit down with maybe the business analyst or the SME, where they feed in inputs and they can see based on how the automation is going. It's going into, let's say it's going into X and Y fields on the application. So they're actually seeing kind of a visual representation of how that looks. So normally that's how the testing is done. But again, with the delivery life cycle, it depends on how long a process can be automated. It might take you 4 to 6 weeks to actually cycle around different points of the delivery life cycle. So there are other points as well. Once the software, or the not the software, but once the bot is tested, it's always the point of you need to take it to something called an hypercare. So the hypercare is basically where you kind of baby that kind of process in. It's almost replicating how it would behave in production. So you're babying that process in the sense that you're feeding it with small values. So you're testing it with customer data. You could be testing it with customer data, or you will be testing with customer data or some sort of data that can go through the end-to-end flow of that process. So at this time, because it's being babied at this point, if anything were to go wrong, a human user would have to stop, can ask for the bot to be stopped, and they will have to work the cases or correct the cases as well. So once that hypercare period, or it's almost like a warranty period, once that warranty period is over, you move that bot to the live environment. But moving the bot to the live environment, if you're in the software delivery lifecycle, it doesn't mean that that's the end. Sometimes you need to do fixes. Sometimes there are outages. So these are things that you sort of manage as business as usual activities. And pretty much that's how a bot would normally go. You you fix things. Fixing things also, it could be very common to fix things, especially if you're automating web applications. So if you're automating web applications, you would notice that someone can change the look and feel of the application. So at that point, you need to revise your script and revise the way your bot works. And sometimes it gets to a point where your bot might have to be decommissioned. It's possible. Just the same way any software application will be decommissioned at some point, they get to be retired. So these are how things sort of flow in the delivery life cycle. Very similar to developing any software. The only difference is you're not developing software, you're developing bots.
You told about the 5 years of work which you were supposed to put in to get inside an RPA. Of course, .NET also has the job market. RPA is a different approach altogether. It's not like you being proficient in .NET or else you being like proficient in Python itself and you become a Python developer. It's a whole new level of approach. So, what are the questions that you asked when you were preparing for an RPA interview, or when you decided that you want to be a professional in an RPA? What were those questions that you asked? Like, if I want to go for an interview, I will be asking, am I really good at this? Am I really good at that? Or else, what should I improvise? So, what should be the first step in order to enter an RPA professional world? So, what should be their readiness that they need to have in order to attend the interview and also be active in order to behave like a professional in an RPA world?
So I think the first thing you would do is your research. I did my research in 2015, but I was lucky to get an opportunity in RPA. I did my research. At that point, I think there was just there's one PDF I could find online that told me really what RPA is, because it was sort of a closed system. So it wasn't at that point. At that point, it wasn't something you could find on Stack Overflow or any of those websites. So you want to do your research, and I think the best place to do your research, there are different ways to do your research. One being you can go into the, Nakuri, for instance, or you can go into Indeed and see sort of the job spec. What are people require? What's required for a developer? What is required for a business analyst? What's required for a PM? So you might actually gauge the skill set from job site. It's easier to do that. I do that these days. I look at job sites, I look at what they're looking for. Then the next thing you want to do is you want to keep on top of the latest articles or news on the same field as well. Because if you were to go for an interview, they would ask you questions on what's really happening in the field. There are best places to look. You can subscribe to newsletters, you can subscribe to podcasts. There are a couple of podcasts, thanks to COVID now, there are a couple of podcasts. So formulated automation is an example of one of the podcasts. You can actually listen to a lot of the key experts, the industry experts as well. So you might look at newsletters, podcasts, read articles, network with people as well that are also in the same field. So, and also because the skill set is slightly different for, there's a reason why I say this. The skill set is slightly different from someone that is a core developer to someone that wasn't a developer. So if you are a core developer, if you have Python skills, if you have .NET skills like C Sharp, VB, J Sharp, or or Java, for instance, you're more likely to scale through the interview sometimes, because sometimes they do require someone to be very technical in those sort of technologies, and depending on also the technology you're looking at, because some of the technology are more suited to people with .NET sort of experience, and they are built on .NET Stack as well. An example of this would be UiPath, Blue Prism. They are .NET Stack, so you might find that you might be able to code or do things within their environment, like the studio, if you want to extend the capabilities sometimes. So automation anywhere is Java based. So you might be looking at that, especially if you're very experienced. If you're thinking about the learning curve as well. So it's easier to familiarize yourself with something that looks quite similar to what you've been doing before. And they depending on the job spec again, as a developer, you're expected, apart from developing, it's not only about development, you're expected to also have, awareness of the business. So if you're deciding, because RPA is sort of a generic tool, it's not a tool, RPA is sort of like any programming language that is kind of generic, meaning you can use it in any organization. So you probably want to do your investigation on this organization you're applying to. So if you're applying to insurance, you know, for them, RPA is completely different. The kind of processes they're trying to automate, insurance policy stuff, these are different, completely different from someone in the healthcare, for instance. So you want to do investigation into the business area, the business you're going into. Then you want to also brush up some of your other skill sets as well. So you need to be proficient or to a certain level with Microsoft Office, because you would spend a lot of time, doing things like letters, things like Excel automation, things like report. So you want to spend some time, make sure you're very proficient with Microsoft Word. You need to brush up all this sort of skill, and you need to be open-minded. I always tell someone as well, you need to be open-minded. You need to you need to be open to different sort of ideas. There are different ways to automate things. you know if you were, let's say for instance, you might have a scenario where you were to extend some of the functionalities. Let's say you wanted to zip a file, for instance. These are things that a core developer that was developing other languages will be able to do. But you coming in as with a core experience of Python, your approach might be to use Python. Someone else's approach might be to use C Sharp. It doesn't make any of these approaches wrong. It just gives you an opportunity to be able to leverage different ideas for automation as well. So these are things that I would normally say. It's very common, regardless of if you're going into a beginner or an experienced role, you want to be able to understand a bit of, I won't say very basic HTML, because if you're doing web application, that is very important for you to be able to understand a bit of HTML. But again, it's something you can learn along the way. It's not something that you need to know, but you can learn along the way. But basically, understanding the business, you need to even understand flow chart sometimes. You need to understand how a flow chart would work in a kind of, because business processes would be that kind of rule-based kind of way, where if this is not happening, that's happening. So all these kind of things is something that you can learn. Some of them you can learn, and some are very good for you to have before getting into a job.
Let's just end the talk with this one question. I just want to ask you this one question. How do you measure the return on investment in an RPA process at any given stage? Let it be like I'm a pharmaceutical company who is trying to get some insights from you. So how would be your approach in calculating the profits of applying RPA into my company? What's that approach that's all about?
Well, I think it depends. This calculating the return of investment would go from will be different from organization to organization. I'm not an expert, I don't do project management, but what I would tell you as well is a company needs to measure what success looks like. So they have to have key indicators, key performance indicators. And depending on the organization, what their key performance indicators would be different. So let's say we take Amazon as an example, right? Amazon does a lot of shipping, they do a lot of e-commerce. For them, it's very obvious that customer experience is something that's big for them. They want to do next day shipping. Customer experience is big for them. So for them, defining customer experience and finding a way to measure customer experience is something that's key for them. So, oh, as I was saying, for a company, it's completely different. Their key performance indicators would be completely different. Some might be, measurement in terms of performance. Some might be in terms of customer retention. So depending on what this needs to be defined, I would say this needs to be defined earlier on before you start doing major investment into RPA. So you need to know what your your predicted value from RPA is going to look like. And if you're looking at some people's key performance indicators, reducing cost. So if they're looking at reducing cost, at what fraction are you going to reduce the cost? What are the areas? So these also key performance indicators also affect the kind of processes you automate. Because if you were looking at cost reduction, you're probably automating processes that take a lot of cost. So these are some of the things that you need to be sort of aware of. And these are things that the head of RPA or the head of automation will be very involved with. So they always define all of these key performance indicators. It won't be something a developer like myself will do, but it's something that C-level switch people will determine what their key performance indicator is.
I can get that, because key performance indicator KPI meets happen rigorously, in different environments. There is Scrum, there is Agile, there is CMM, IMS, there is lot of things which is happening in the software development. Key performance indicator is the one factor that we will be looking for, whether it's development which is growing faster, or it's the deployment where the customer satisfaction is happening in a way that the market time is not being lagged. So yeah, that's all about, one key thing in your profile is you found the job through LinkedIn.
Yes.
So how is this LinkedIn effective in finding a new job? Of course, it's not about the luck, it's all about the hard work. I know that because you have done lot of courses, lot of webinars. I think you have attended lot of things up. So I just want viewers to get to know what's that big chunk of luck or the hard work that is required in order to get a job through LinkedIn.
So LinkedIn is a very powerful space. I would say that. And the reason why I say that as well is through LinkedIn, if you use your LinkedIn effectively, you can have jobs, you can get companies looking for you rather than you looking for companies. It depends on the strategy you have, but for a company to want to offer you a job through LinkedIn, you must actually be providing value. So this value could be shown based on, if you showcase videos on a regular basis. Let's say to use a particular tool, UiPath, for instance, it's very common. There's a lot of guys doing UiPath videos at this moment. They have a YouTube channel, showcasing that these technical skills um, is very important for organizations because it's different with RPA because the way RPA is set up as want to work within an enterprise, most interviews will not require you to actually build a bot on the spot. So it's very hard for companies to assess if you have those skill sets or not. So one is showing value, that you're providing value on LinkedIn. And two, before I got my job, I was more of a writer. I wrote a lot on RPA, on Quora, not even on LinkedIn. So by the time I came back to LinkedIn to sort of start talking more about my experience, again, this might be something for other people to take note of. You might want to talk about your daily experiences. You might want to talk about, some solution design. Again, you have to be very careful what you should, you showcase outside as well. But just give them an insight into your skill set, what you can deliver, you know and these are things that if you were using LinkedIn, not only LinkedIn, if you were using Twitter as well, it could be very instrumental into getting the job. So for me, it was more like showcasing my talent, not talent, but showing my skill set on what I can do, kind of processes. Sometimes you can talk about processes you've automated. You can do videos, you can do interviews, but all of this sort of helps because every recruiter that is about to employ you or is sourcing out for you, they tend to look at your profile. They would look at your pictures. They would look at if you have pictures on LinkedIn. They would look at your pictures. They would look at your It's like very important for you to have your LinkedIn profile filled out properly. You want to have your LinkedIn profile filled out properly. You want to make sure that it talks about your skill set. He has all the I know it has all the key phrases. So you want to post something like RPA developer, you want to post C sharp, VB, whatever. So these things that recruiters, when they're checking for it, they can't bounce on your profile because they can see all these kind of things as well. You want to make sure that your previous jobs are there. You want to make sure your educational background is there. You want to make sure that you have, if sometimes it might help if you have recommendations on LinkedIn. So you want to make sure that your profile is properly filled out. And if you are also if you're interested in a particular company, you want to make sure you're networking with people from that company so they can actually see what you're doing. It makes it easier for people to want to refer you if they know what you can offer. So normally, if you're interested in XYZ, it's no brainer for me to want to add a lot of people from XYZ into my network. So I want them to be I want them to be in my network. So whenever I post, they are seeing what I'm posting. I'm looking at all their skill set. I've gone on Indeed or any of those jobs. I'm looking at what they're looking for, and I'm using that to post content. So that kind of helps in terms of job search. And also, even if you don't have that strategy, LinkedIn also has its own job kind of portal as well, where you can apply, either with your CV or with your profile. So if you're applying with your CV, they still look at your profile as well. So you want to make sure that you're contributing to the community, you're involved in the community, you're networking and doing something in RPA.
Tolani, thank you so much for giving me such a wonderful podcast. It's a very short and a sweet podcast to just give them an actual intuitive understanding of what this RPA is all about. There are people who are still thinking this is a jargon. This can't be achieved by any person. It requires an huge aptitude. So you have to be emotionally connected in order to get through that subject. That's what I learned from you. And thank you so much for giving such a wonderful podcast.
Thank you, Vishwa. Thanks for having me.